She's a good egg.
Yeah.
Mm.
Rebecca, would you like to do your presentation first, or would you like to wait?
And Sue's been using musicology for quite a long time now.
Yeah, so she's told us. So Sue is very cutting edge. She's always on the lookout for something innovative. So
Yeah, it's so impressive. She was an early adopter.
yeah, we'll have to find out about this.
All
All
right.
right. Well, I'm going to mute myself.
Great.
I'm
Just
sure
a question for Rebecca. Does she want to?
Jennifer
Go earlier?
wants to take control of stuff.
Can they hear?
So
Can they hear me, Felicia?
I'm going to mute myself.
No, they should be able to hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear? Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah, I was just going to ask Rebecca if she wanted to do her presentation earlier, or is it okay to wait?
It's up to you. I'm totally fine with waiting.
Okay. Well,
Why don't we just wait till a couple more?
we'll wait till a couple more people are here. So we'll do some of the other business portion of the meeting if that's okay with you. Yeah. Awesome. All righty. So I guess we'll go ahead and jump right in. First, I want to welcome any new members we have here. If you don't mind standing up, I want to just thank you for being here and for any visitors. So we're excited to have you, and we'll have a few more stragglers and people coming in. And this is, I was talking to Miriam, and this is our first kind of kickoff meeting and brunch that we've had since 2019. You know, we had hybrid stuff last year too, but this is the first time that we'll be able to eat together and everything. So we've been looking forward to this. Yeah. Do you want to go around and introduce everybody, or?
Oh, that's right. We're on a microphone. I don't know if they stand up and talk nice and loud, but they'd be heard.
If they don't mind coming up a little closer to the microphone.
I
Okay.
think it would be faster, Jennifer, if you be the speaker in front of the microphone.
Okay.
Not everybody's going to see them.
Oh, I see. There's a camera too. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
it's okay.
I'm so sorry.
Camera's flexible.
No, that's better.
It's okay. Yeah. Well, I guess if do you talk about the visitors that you want?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, the visitors. Do you mind coming up and just saying hello and just to, if you feel comfortable, or is that okay? All right. Tell you what, we won't. All right. We welcome you. We don't want to put you on the spot. Never mind. All right. So welcome.
Can they just
Yeah.
name who they are and you can say them? Like,
Yeah. Just maybe that. Yeah. Just go through a name. It's
Cindy.
Cindy.
What's your last name, Cindy? Wells.
Cindy Wells. Welcome. And
I'm Pamela Johnson.
Pamela Johnson. Okay. Great.
Melissa McFaul.
Melissa McFaul. Great. Oh, this is our award winner. My goodness. I was like, okay, yes, that's Megan is here. Yes. Thanks for being here. Okay.
I'm Bonnie Summerfield. I haven't been able to come for years because I've been working every morning. So,
Wonderful.
yay.
Bonnie Summerfield's joining us as well. That's great. Fantastic. All right. So I sent you all the minutes from the June meeting, if you have those. So we need a motion to approve those. There weren't many minutes because it was mainly the recital and everything that was rescheduled from May. So if we have a motion to approve those, that would be wonderful. Max, excellent. A second? Carol is the second. All right, very good. All right, so we're going to try to get through these rather quickly. The winter dinner party, we haven't had that for a while, and we actually do need a host for that. That is on January 28th. If we have any brave souls that would like to volunteer now or on Zoom, I don't know if we have anybody that's ready to go for that. And if we don't have any takers there, Felicia, are you okay with doing that? Well, thank you, Felicia. All right, excellent. All right, and then we're going to move right on to Miriam's got a few things to talk about, programs overview and a few other things. So Miriam, if you don't mind coming up here. Yeah.
Okay. Hello, in case you don't know me, Miriam Shingle, and I'm the past president and the program chair. And I was instrumental in helping the programs come together this year. But basically, I am just so grateful for my program committee because without them, I wouldn't be able to do this. So I really appreciate all the time that they spent in the meetings that we had and all their ideas, and that's why we have the program that we have this year. So I'm really grateful to them. So one of the things, if you notice in your handbook in the back, we have 5 minutes for idea presentations. Doesn't have to be new ideas, it could just be ideas, things that you're doing in your teaching or things that you recently came across. And this year we have a list of that. Today will be musicology, and we have Max next month will be talking about keyboard harmony, chord scales. And in January, Jonathan will be talking about using flipped instruction in your lessons. And in February, Deborah will be talking about rote pieces. And in April, we have Ashley Radcliffe, who's going to talk about sensory play in the studio. So those are little 5 to 10 minute presentations that happen during our business meeting portion. But as far as the main programs are concerned, we have a lot going on. As you know, today was supposed to be Jonathan Flowers, and since he was not well enough to present for us today, he's online, thankfully. We can see him. But he's going to do it next month. So we're just doing a little switcheroo. So today is Elaine Friedlander. She's going to be talking about how she teaches scales. And next month, it'll be Jonathan Flowers, who's going to talk about concept preparation. The exact title is Sound Before Sight, Concept Preparation for Elementary and Intermediate Pianists. But I would like to propose that you could probably use some of the concepts for other instruments as well, not just piano. Let's see. So then in November, we do have the master class at Westchester University that is just for piano, and where we have about 3 or 4 of our own students and about 3 or 4 of Westchester University students participating in that. So it's a joint venture with us and Westchester University. So that happens every November. We have a holiday luncheon in December. So we would just come out to the Desmond at the Great Valley Corporate Center and come together for finally our holiday luncheon, which we've had to skip for a couple years now. So then in January, we have something, we have January and February are both virtual presenters because one is living in Spain, I believe. And I'm trying to think, I think that's Jana Carlson is in Spain. Yeah. So she used to live in the United States and then moved to Spain just a few months ago. So she is going to talk about demystifying the studio website, and which is a great marketing thing. So if you have a website or if you don't have a website, but maybe you were thinking of putting one together at some point, like myself, then you get to come to that meeting and learn some more. But it's not here. It's virtual only. So, and then that's it. This is the January meeting is only virtual. Don't come here to the church.
Don't go to Spain.
And don't go to Spain. All right, so in February, we have another virtual presenter, Amy Chaplin. She does, I think, live here in the United States. Yeah. And it's called Evolutionary Entrepreneurialism. Grow your studio one yes at a time. So if you want to get a few more students or figure out, some ideas on how to do that, please come to that meeting or just come, because I'm sure you can always glean some information for your studio. So let's see. And then, interestingly, we have Charles Lowe. He is from the Francis Clark Center. And he works with Marvin Blickenstaff. Marvin Blickenstaff actually recommended him for our next mainline music teachers master class, meaning our students only. So not combined with Westchester University, it's just our students. And it will be here at the church, and it takes place on a Saturday, so our students can be here. So Saturday afternoon. So, which is great to have that piano master class. I understand that Charles is fabulous, and it's for elementary, intermediate students, but we can stick a few advanced students in here, no problem. Yeah. So let's see. So, or a couple advanced students. All right. So we have finally in April, Vincent Craig. He is a Westchester University professor, and he is going to be presenting piano music of Black composers. All right, and so Dr. Craig will be coming here in April for that. And then finally, the last thing is just a teacher's thing. It's a teacher's recital and potluck lunch on May 9th and it's at Carol Angus's home. We are so grateful to her for offering that a year after year. She's a fabulous hostess.
Farmtime fires need to learn something.
Yeah, you're going to be getting up and talking about that really soon here. And so the last thing I want to mention, oh, I should have said it. In January, the Jana Carlson announcement, the Jana Carlson presentation is we're going to have Jennifer send out a link for a survey so that the presenter, Jana Carlson, can gather information from you so that she can target what you need to know about website. And so that survey is going to be going out this week, and it will close in November, I think November 14th. I'm going to shut that survey down because then she wants it like by mid-November. So that means the presentation is going to be tailor-made to you, and which is awesome. So I'm really, really happy about that. And I think I'm done.
Is that my agenda there?
I think it is.
All right, awesome. So I think next up we have Joy is going to talk about Super Saturday, and she's calling from her car. Technology's amazing.
I am not far. I hope you can't hear I hope you can hear me over the traffic that's driving past. So, and if you have a problem. But I just wanted to talk about Super Saturday. Super Saturday is in January this coming year, 2023, January 21st, which makes it a little strange timing with the winter break. But if we plan in advance to make it happen, then we can time it with our studios so that we can have a bunch of students participate. It would be wonderful to have you join us. What Super Saturday is we have master coaching and we have a play-a-thon. The master coaching is we take an esteemed professor from Westchester University and let them teach your student for a block of time. And they really get a lot out of that, our students teaching or studying with a certain piece or whatever with a professor. The other part of it is the play-a-thon, which isn't really like you have to play for 24 hours. Like, it's not an endurance contest. It's what I've often used it as a recital opportunity. So I'll use this beautiful Steinway that they have at Westchester University's Hall and give all the kids a chance to play a really, really good instrument and have the parents be able to hear it. You can do other things with the play-a-thon. You just have to sign up for a half-hour block of time, I think. And then do whatever you want in the recital hall. Now I have together a committee of Super Saturday where we're thinking of new ideas that we could use the university, like potentially using their keyboard lab to do some ensemble playing. Or we could possibly have a maybe percussion thing and some improvisation. And we'd love to get some Westchester University pedagogy students involved. And we have really cool ideas. And maybe you'd like to join me on that committee. So you can be in touch with me. I will be happy to have you join us. That's about it.
You have the password. The password's at the beginning of the handbook in case it did change. Hopefully everybody remembered that it changed. So it's conveniently right in the beginning of the handbook there. So if you need the directory, that's also online, but it's only the members only portion of the website. So just a reminder about that. Okay, James can't be here. He's our Dorothy Sutton Festival chair, but I'm just going to remind you that the registration should be open for that now. The deadline is the 25th. So that's opportunity for your students to play in front of.
It is open.
It is
And
open.
also on the website.
Awesome. Thank you, Felicia. Felicia's our website extraordinaire.
I literally opened it like a few minutes ago.
There we go. So yeah, just a reminder about that. So the deadline's the 25th. That's, your student will get to play for a judge, and then there's also a theory test portion to that. If you have a question about the level or whatever, you can email James. He'll send you a sample out of what the theory that the students will have. There's different levels. So I think, any questions about the Dorothy Sutton Festival? It's coming up to you soon in October, so.
One big announcement about the state showcase. PMTA received a big grant, so there will be no admission fee for the state festival.
All right. Wow.
We are being sponsored through a grant. So if there was ever a reason to go, here it is.
All right, that's awesome. All righty.
You said that the deadline is the 25th, that's
September 25th, yes. Thanks, Deb, yeah. All right, and then the Connie Murray Festival is in the spring. So Felicia, do you want to say a few things about that briefly?
Sure.
Awesome.
If she could get out.
From the tick corner.
I have navigated my labyrinth. Anyway, so we're making some changes to the Connie Murray Festival. We are in the pursuit of accessibility and in the pursuit of garnering more interest, more making it more convenient for those who, say, have 100 sports to play, or they're on vacation, or other things, or they get sick, things like that. Or they have certain types of anxiety. We have opened up the virtual option. So this is a hybrid festival now. We have the ability to take in both in-person judging, and we will have one virtual judge. We'll see if we can get someone from elsewhere, out of the local area for a different experience. And this we'll open it up for those who can't make it to those particular times or can't commit to those particular times within our time frame. We're also going to have fewer judges so that we can run for more of the day. We ran into a bit of a scheduling issue with having too many judges and not enough participants. Kind of made it awkward for scheduling. So to minimize that issue, we have that option now. And this is just to make it more accessible to everyone. Anything else?
I don't think so. She has questions.
Yeah. Virtual is free. Yes, there will be more detail. There are more details on the website as to the deadlines of recording, because we must have the recordings a full week before the festival. So that's your cost. That's your cost for the flexibility. You must be prepared a little bit earlier.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Felicia. Yeah. And I also want to give a shout out to Felicia and also to Jonathan for, helping out with tech and everything the past 2 years, because I don't know what we would do without both of you. So thank you for all the time and energy that takes. All right, and I think next up we have a update on student recitals. Max has graciously accepted that student chair position, so we're grateful for that. So Max, you want to hop on up here and talk about that?
Oh my goodness. If you have your handbook, the dates that are listed on page 20 for the student recitals, they say tentative. The fall recital, November 6th at 2 p.m., that is confirmed. That will be at Westminster Presbyterian Church. The spring recital is still tentative, but the fall is literally just this morning. I received the email from Westminster Presbyterian that we can be there. So it's Sunday, November 6th at 2 p.m. And so the regulations and everything about the student recitals are here in the handbook, and they're on the website, so you can look more about that. That's another performance opportunity for our students. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Max. Wonderful. All right, and then we have the ever-enthusiastic Carol is going to talk about primetime players and the teacher recital and everything. So just a side note, Carol was my first piano teacher, so it's kind of cool to still be in touch with her. So.
Now, Jennifer, you're not supposed to make me use that three-letter word, because I don't believe in 2 3-letter words. O-L-D and A-G-E. Hi, for those who don't know me, I'm Carol Angus. I've been around a long time, in this area, 32 years. So Primetime Players is kind of my pet project that I believe that we need to come together as teachers to share new music, new ideas, silly songs, silly being, ask questions that maybe you may think they're silly or not appropriate or whatever. Anything that comes in the door stays in my house. It does not get shared. And whether it's one person or probably the most we've had at Primetime Players in one time was 8. But there have been times when there have been one other person. We do not close the door unless nobody comes. So the rule is, I say 9:30. If nobody comes by 10, I go on and do what I need to do in my household, and we don't have it. The first gathering is Tuesday, the 27th of September, which is 2 weeks from today, 9:30. And I didn't really put topics this year, but because we're at the end of September, I have tons of Halloween music if people want to get ideas for, I always do a spook recital. So if you want ideas for something fun that the kids will eat up and they'll do, I have tons of Halloween music. You can bring new music that you have found during your perusal of the music store or online or wherever you get your music. We're always open to new arrangements, new composers, new duets. I actually have 3 keyboards in my music room, so if you've got something for multiple pianos, we can do it. And if you have any other questions, you're welcome to reach out and ask me. And then just jumping ahead, the May teachers recital and luncheon, which is also at my house. The May recital oftentimes is sparked by and filled by the people who've come to Primetime Players. That's where oftentimes we find the music that's going to be shared with everybody. So in the this last May, we were together for the first time in 2 years, and we had tons of good food. You always have to remember that there's food attached to this group also. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them later, okay?
Thanks, Carol.
All right, so I guess that brings us to our holiday luncheon, and then Jane Heinzelman, she's also going to talk about Piano Guild, so if you want to... Just briefly, okay. If you don't mind coming up here for the microphone, that would be great.
Okay. This is not part of Main Line's program, but I do the National Piano Guild, and most of you probably know about it, but just if there's a new teacher there, this is a possibility for your students to perform. And for me, it has been a really good thing for my studio and seems to motivate students very well. So it's less structured, I would say, than the Royal Schools. It's less expensive, and you have more choices than you have there. So it depends on the kind of program you're running. I'm not saying one's better than the other. But the Guild, they can play a jazz piece, they can play a popular piece, they can play a classical piece. But what they are aiming for is, in the end, for you to do, and you get into the higher levels, like a Baroque piece, a classical piece, a Romantic piece, and a modern piece. But you don't have to do that, but that's what the aim is. They also have a high school diploma that can be put on the kids that are older's transcript, which is a nationally recognized program. So I found that has been a motivating thing for my older students. So I have a center. Deborah has a center. Donna Kay has a center. She's not here today, Donna Kay. I don't know if anybody else here.
My center's also, last year and this year, we started a virtual option.
Right, and we did too. We started a virtual option. Last year we did do it in person for the first time in 2 years, but I think there will probably be, there is a virtual option.
Yes,
So you can do it either way. So if you look at their guild syllabus, it looks, so imposing that people throw up their hands and say, that is ridiculous. But, you can, it's a lot of it is like names of teachers and centers and things. So there's just about 4 or 5 pages that are critical to look at. So anyway, I have some old guild syllabi here. If anybody wants to just take a look, or if you have any questions, or give me a call. But we'd love to have a few more teachers at our center. We used to have like 12, and now we're down to 3 or 4.
Which center is that?
It's called Malvern Center. Yeah, and it's actually has been in person at Paoli Presbyterian for the last number of years. So that's where I usually hold it. Okay. And as far as the holiday luncheon goes, Last year we had to cancel because of COVID. Hopefully this year we won't have to cancel. I haven't actually been in touch with them, but they used to have a lovely buffet at the Desmond. Hopefully they'll have that back. But in a month or so, I'll have more details as for the price. But it's always a lovely occasion. We just come and we eat. That's all we do. and talk. Exactly. It's just relaxed. And since we don't have a holiday party, this is our chance to kind of get together and celebrate the holidays. So that's it. What? What was the date of that? The holiday luncheon is the second Tuesday in December, whatever that date is, like the 13th? 13th. Right. And it's usually, we've so far had it at the Desmond Hotel at 11:30. It hasn't been absolutely confirmed, but I think that's what we'll do. Any questions about the guild or anything? Okay, this is just an opportunity. I found it great.
All right, so I think moving right ahead now, we're going to have our 5 minutes for an idea, which is virtual. And I think Sue is going to introduce, by the way, Sue is one of our amazing past presidents, and we love having her still part of Mainline. And she's going to introduce our musicology expert here. So take it away, Sue.
Okay, well, Rebecca, thank you for coming and being willing to do this. I'm sure you can do a much better job. They initially asked me to do it. Given that this is your creation and you're intimately involved with it every day of the week, I'm sure. It's best for you to give the presentation, and thank you so much for being willing. And thank you for your patience while we sat here for this initial portion of the meeting. I moved to Florida a year ago, and I greatly love and miss the Mainline Music Teachers Association. And I'm sure you witnessed what a dynamic, great group of people are involved. And it's so great to see all of them and the newbies. So to further introduce Rebecca, she is from Midtown Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And she has graduated from Mohawk College in Applied Arts and McMaster University in music. She's been teaching piano for 20 years, and she has an in-home school in addition to this business that she spawned. And Rebecca, when did you start musicology?
In 2020, the idea came about, and then we launched in 2021.
Okay. So just to introduce musicology, I've been on it. I went on pretty early when I saw that she was offering this very low latency app that was going to work on all worldly devices and globally. And, I found Zoom to be challenging at a lot of times, and time delay and interruptions and static and a lot of things. Not to say that you don't have that, on Wi-Fi all the time, but musicology is way more reliable and higher quality. And I'm finding it to be a good fit for me and my students. It also has some really cool features, which she will be sharing with you. And I think that's a good intro. What do you think?
Well, thank you, Sue. Thank you so much for asking me to be here today. And I loved watching the meeting beforehand. What a lovely space for all of you to be in. It's just beautiful. And I can see that you're all very passionate teachers, and I appreciate that. So thank you for having me today. And Sue is one of our very early adopters, which is so extremely impressive. She had many questions when she first started using musicology, which we were very happy to answer. And it also helped us in our own messaging. So thank you for that, Sue. I am going to just pull up my slides here, and then I will share One second. I think you need to add, you've disabled sharing for me, whoever set up this meeting. Could you authorize me, please? So I'll just tell you a little bit about this while you're doing that. Music Hall, so like Sue said, I am a music teacher with over 2 decades of experience. I know I look young, that is my problem. And I love teaching kids. And I noticed at the beginning of the pandemic that there was quite a lot of struggle with children using technology, and in particular, teachers using technology who had not been used to using technology in their lessons. So despite what you may think about myself, I'm actually not as tech savvy as you think I am. I never used technology in my teaching at all. I was straight stickers, pencils, papers, always HB pencils. And I really wanted a platform that was accessible to everyone, especially young children. I have young children myself, and I watched my then 6-year-old struggle using Teams and Zoom, and just did not being very interactive to him. So I wanted to create something where he could participate in easily and understand. What did you say here? You can't, oh, are you not able to give access to sharing? That's fine if you can't, I can just wing it. Oh, it looks like I can share now. You did it, whatever you did. So I will go ahead and present it to you now. All right. So welcome to Musicology, a very interactive platform with exceptional audio. I think Sue did a really good job at explaining who I am. So that's me there. And this app was created specifically for music from the ground up. It's our mission to make teaching music more intuitive, effective, and engaging experience than it ever was before. And that is online. So in the past, teachers have gotten used to maybe screen sharing constantly on Zoom and having to perform on their end for their students, which is extremely exhausting for the teacher and sometimes not very engaging for the kids. So that's where musicology comes in. In terms of interactivity, we have a very easy to use whiteboard, which has all of these great colors on it. We have emojis built in. You can upload files to the whiteboard. And if you're a prepper before your lessons, you can load them into your student's room before the lesson, or you can just simply drag them onto the screen if you're a last minute teacher like I am. You can draw, you can annotate on it, both sides. You don't have to put in any extra settings there. There's no authorization required. It's just easily accessible for the kids, and everything's icon-based too, so that they can read it really easily. There's these great animated emojis. And on top of that, the audio is proprietary to musicology alone. So you cannot find our audio code anywhere else. We have worked extremely hard to get it just right so that you can accept all frequencies from all different kinds of instruments, up from violins down to bass guitars, drums even, and the audio won't cut out. You can have dogs barking in the background, washing machines going. Your audio is not going to cut out. It's as natural an experience as you can get it.
Rebecca, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, for some reason the screen is blurry, and I did put a message in the chat, and apparently it's not just me. I don't know if there's anything you can do about it, but I just wanted you to know.
Let me see, what if maybe I'll try stop sharing and I'll share again. Sure, yeah, I can do that. It might take a little bit though. Could it be the screen that you're on maybe because it's being broadcast on a screen there? Okay.
It's saying that Rebecca's bandwidth network is low on my screen, so that's the issue.
My bandwidth network is low.
Yeah, whatever. These things happen. There's always ghosts in the machine.
It shouldn't be. I'm on Bell 5. I'm on fiber network. So normally my upload, and there's nobody else here. Can do a speed test unless somebody's been playing with my pods. Yeah, well, I'll email it to you then. Or I can just talk. I don't want to take up too much of your time either. Yeah, why don't I do that? That's fine. So is my screen blurry right now? Can you see me okay? You can see me okay.
It looks a little better.
Oh, internet. Okay, so I'll just go where I left off here. So over here, I think I'm pointing in the right direction. There we are. This is where I left off with our grand staff feature, which has a built-in virtual piano. So that piano there can actually be played on both ends of the screen. So your student can press the notes, it'll light up on your end and the other way around. And you can also connect this to your MIDI keyboard. As long as it has internet MIDI on it, then it'll connect. You just have to plug it into your computer. It's very easy to do. And you can play your chords and it'll show up on the keyboard. You can take those letters off too. I know that as teachers, we don't always want those there. There is a little rainbow sign there that you can make rainbow keys with, and they'll light up all different sorts of colors. And then these notes above here, we have this icon right here, which looks like a little flying eighth note, and it pulls up this notes menu. And then when you click on one of those colored circles, it brings out another menu of musical notation that you and your student can drag on both sides of the screen. So this is really great for working with older students and just reinforcing key signatures or working with inversions for chords. I always had problems, explaining what an inversion is. So you can do that very visually on here. We have those great colored dots that a lot of teachers like to use, the magnetic boards with the colored dots on the staff. So this is sort of a digital version of that. And it's just great for younger students too. I'll often have my very young beginner students, like age 5, open up this feature and just copy the first few bars of the song that they're learning. And it just really reinforces what they're reading since we're not there in person to point at it. So other features that we have a built-in metronome, and the audio is pushed from the students to the teacher's side so that you're not going to have to worry about the latency between the two of you. And speaking of latency, it's extremely low. We don't travel through servers, so platforms that have group rooms on them, so where you can have many people on the call at the same time, the audio and the video is going to travel through the server from the teacher to the student. So that's going to take more time. You can't do anything about the latency there. But musicology, because we're only one-to-one, it doesn't travel through a server. So you're just like a direct phone line. And you can play duets with each other if you have a decent internet or your bandwidth is not compromised like mine is today. And who knows why, right? Like internet is, it kind of does its own thing sometimes. So I'm probably going to go and reset my router after this call and turn my computers off and on again. What else? So every student has their own student room. So this is different than Zoom. We're not sending links to people. You design the student's room or the family's room. It can be for a family if you're one after each other. And you design a simple code for them. And then the student comes into musicology, presses a button that says, I'm a student, types in their code. It's always the same code. And then you connect with your student. On the teacher's end, there's a list that will pop up on your home screen. It'll have your student's name, their room, and a little notification sign that says that the student is online or not online. You click on that and then it connects your call. So it's very simple to use. Like learning any new technology, you're going to have to get used to something different, but we have lots of support videos on our YouTube channel. We have a really great website with blogs. I'm always reachable and pretty accessible. We have Team Musicology's our Facebook page. You can ask questions there. And the platform itself is $19.99 US a month, and it's free for students. There's no limits, and it's just a wonderful platform. So I'm open to take questions if anybody has any. And I think I covered everything. Sue, what do you think?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you covered a lot. And the thing of it is that I think the visual, had it been clearer, you know, it would have been so much more effective. But we're going to get that when you email the link. And those who are interested can follow up and review it that way. Yeah, it's funny. All of a sudden, it got a little bit clearer just now, but it was definitely fuzzy. Sorry.
Yes, internet.
Yeah.
Something's going on, I guess. It's cloudy out. That could be why.
Yeah, but thank you so much, Rebecca. Very, very kind of you. And Rebecca is very responsive. I will also say that, you know, I am very, I think you all know me, inquisitive and detail oriented. And she really stepped up to the plate to help me whenever I had questions.
Your questions were great, though. They really help us with onboarding. And I think that's the most important thing when you're developing something that's for many people, is that to not get offended when people ask questions or have feedback or suggestions, because this is just going to make it a better product for everyone, because we all teach differently. So thanks, Sue.
You're welcome.
All right, well, let's give a round of applause for Rebecca. All right, I think our next item on the agenda is, I'm really happy that our Constance Murray Scholarship recipient is actually here with us today, which is fantastic, and she is Megan DiCamilio, so if you want to come on up, let's give her a round of applause for this. I don't know if you want to say any words about this award, or?
Yeah, so I'm doing my second year of my master's in piano pedagogy at Westchester University. I'm doing an accompanying assistantship there, so that's paying for half of it, and so this award was also nice to get some other money towards tuition as well, so thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Awesome. We have a certificate for you here.
Also, Megan is a participant as a high school student in all of their
Yes, yeah, all of the, the Dorothy Sutton Festival.
That's for you, yeah. We'll get a quick picture.
Oh, okay, yes.
So, yeah.
Okay. Oh.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, wait.
We especially appreciate, I know we know how hard it is for college students to, take time out of their schedule to come to these meetings, so we appreciate your being here. So I think we're... is there any new news or any questions anybody has before we get started with our program? I think we covered most of the things. Miriam, is there something?
I think I just have to introduce her.
Okay, great. Oh, just one note. Yeah, we have brochures printed up in the back there, so feel free to grab a bunch of those, give them to people you know, spread the word about Mainline. We're one of the most active groups among PMTA, so that's a source of pride for us. And just a note of thanks to Miriam. She's been amazing as helping me with being president this last year. So I want to give her a round of applause for everything she's done. So I think without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started, and we're going to have a lot of food afterwards. So I'm going to pick the food up now, so there'll be plenty here. So Miriam, take it away.
Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce Elaine Friedlander. She's a very long-time member of Mainline Music Teachers, and she has been teaching for 50-some years. What's the exact number? 56 years. Whoa, okay. That's amazing. So she's going to give some of her wisdom today on what she does with scales. And so she received her bachelor's in performance and music ed from the Philadelphia Musical Academy and holds a master's in music performance from Westchester University. She studied with Anthony Macaulay, Clement Petrillo, and Richard Valletta. Yeah, Dr. Valletta. She has also done additional training with Valerie Lloyd Watts and Carol Bigler at the Suzuki Institute in Kingston, Ontario, and the Taubman Summer Institute, where she worked with Maria Del Pico Taylor. While at Westchester University, she participated in a masterclass with Rebecca Pennies. Mrs. Friedlander has been teaching piano since 1966. Since she also has classroom experience teaching music, she brings her education background to her private lessons. She maintains a busy private piano teaching studio in Westchester, and many of her students have been competition prize winners. A member of Music Teachers National Association, she has served as president of the Mainline Music Teachers Association and was an active member of the board of PMTA, Pennsylvania Music Teachers. She has been an adjudicator for piano competitions and music festivals. She is a member of Pi Kappa Lambda, which is a National Music Honor Society. Through MTNA, she holds national certification for teaching piano. And she teaches music theory as part of regular lessons and in classes for more advanced theory leading to college preparation. For 15 years, she played in the Brandywine Piano Duo with Joanne Crystal. They performed programs of piano music, duet music throughout the Delaware Valley. She has also been a member of the Fellowship Trio, consisting of violin, cello, and piano. So we welcome Elaine.
She didn't need to read that entire lengthy introduction, but I really appreciate that, it was all there. Yes, I've been teaching for a long time, and I will probably say this caveat 3 or 4 times. This is what I do. If you do something different, it's fine. If you think you'd rather keep doing what you do, that's fine. I'm not telling anybody any of this as a way of saying, you've got to do it my way. We've had discussions about teaching scales here before, and there were little points that just never seemed to get covered. And I started thinking about it and realized, I think I'm just going to put together all the stuff I do for teaching scales, cadences, and arpeggios, and just make a presentation. So that's what I've done. So are you going to put my first slide up there? Yeah. And it's, yeah, there you go. There's my first slide. Way back when, as some of you might remember, when Dorothy Hamill was the figure skater who won the gold medal in the Olympics at 70-something, she was the last one who was required to do actual figures on the ice. And I watched her doing that, and I said to myself, well, that's the skating version of scales and arpeggios. Because at that time, the figures had to be very precise and demonstrate that the skater had command of the edge of the blade and control of the blade as they were going over the ice. And the reason it was a big deal with Dorothy Hamill is apparently she was very nearsighted, and when she skated, out on the ice doing her performances, she didn't wear her glasses and it wasn't a problem. But when she was doing the figures, she couldn't see very well. And so they were real concerned because if she didn't get enough points on these figures, she wasn't going to get her gold medal. She did, and she did fine. But it was a learning thing for me to see what they did and how it was, to me, seemed really important to what figure skating was about. It has since become much more athletic than it was then, but that's a different story. I've had 3 wonderful teachers. I've had more than that, but the 3 wonderful ones were Anthony Meckley, Clement Petrillo, and Richard Valletta. And all 3 of those teachers did the same thing, started the lesson with scales. Every time. You walk in the door, and the first thing you did was sit down and play your scales. I know there are some people who don't think that's the way to start a lesson, but I still do it, and I still find it to be effective for a number of reasons. One, it gives the student a chance to warm up. Sometimes they're coming right from school and they haven't touched a piano all day. 2, it gives them a chance to adjust to my piano. Their instruments are always far different from yours, and even this is a Steinway in a very similar serial number to mine, but it feels real different from mine. So it's nice to be able to sit down and adjust to a piano. So that's another reason why I do it. Sometimes it also gives me an idea of what's going on with them based on the way they play them to start. Besides how they're practicing, it could also give me an idea of what their attitude is from what's been going on in their day. We all know that occasionally that's a problem and you need to deal with it. So it just, to me, seems like a great way to start a lesson, just start with those scales. Funny story, I went to the library, this was many years ago, probably close to 40 years ago. I was at the Chester County Library. I don't even know why I was in the music department. I was looking at books, and I see this book, and it says, How to Learn Piano Despite Years of Scales or something, or without learning scales, something like that. And so I pulled it down and I looked at it, and of course, what's in the very first chapter but these are major scales. And this is how you play them. And I thought, well, that's silly. They got the title of this book, Don't Play Scales, and the first thing they tell you is what they are. I put the book back on the shelf. Pointless book. So now you can go on to the first one here. It should be the right thing. Oops, that's not what I want. Oh, shoot. It's missing. Well, I think it's in here. You can pass this around. I have for years been collecting comics that have to do with music subjects. And one of them in here, go to the next slide. Let's see if it's there. Nope. Okay, go back. One of them in here is a comic of, it better be in here. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But the comic is, oh goodness, the Basset Hound. I forget his name. It's a comic I read all the time. Anyway, he's listening to this student practicing scales, and you can see the music goes up, and then it goes up again, and then it goes up again, and at the end, and the Basset Hound is saying, boring. And I thought, yeah, that's how most people see scales, as being boring. Not my students. They're perfectly happy to come in at every lesson and play them. And they do them regularly, and they practice them regularly. They're not as good about the minor ones as they are about the major ones, but they do them, and they do see it as part of of what they have to do. So if you're feeling scale resistance from your students, you can deal with it. It can go away, right? So you can pass this around. Just look at the comics, they're funny. So, okay, you can go on to the next slide there. For my very beginners, especially the very young ones, these are my two favorite books. The Suzuki Piano School Volume 1, which is how we start beginners in the studio. And I say we because I always have an assistant now. Felicia was my assistant for 7 years, and now Max is my assistant. And The Very Young Pianist, which is by Jane Bastian. I combine those two to start students. Now, this, again, if you can take what I use from these two methods and incorporate it into what you do, great. I'm not saying you have to do Suzuki or you have to use Very Young Pianist, but they work for me. The thing I like about Suzuki is it starts with a bouncing motion rather than staying on the key. So the kids come in, you know, I'm sure you've all heard, right? You've all heard that. Okay. So they start with a bouncing touch. Sometimes I just start them with bounces. It depends on the age. Sometimes we can start with that rhythm. But they're not playing legato and they're not holding on to the key. The second variation, which I call bounce, roll, bounce, that's when they do a little sticking to the key and I teach them to lift the wrist. And that's an important part of what they have to do. After that, the Suzuki book has, well, there's one more variation I don't use, and then they introduce what they call tonalization. Tonalization is just 5-finger, walk up and down. So depending on how long it takes them to get the hang of doing the first two variations, the twinkle variations, depending on how long that takes, they don't even hear the word legato until I introduce this. I call it 5-finger exercise. I don't call it pentascale because they're little kids mostly. Pentascale means nothing to them, but if you say all 5 fingers, then they're all going to work. And of course, I don't think I have to tell you that you need to remind them that they need to use their fingers a certain way, blah, blah, blah. Of course, you know that. But here's one of the words that I will say at the beginning that I don't think we say enough, and that is the word tone. Right from the minute they start, even when they're playing the bounces, but we don't talk about it too much there. As soon as they start holding that key down, I start asking them to listen to their tone. Is it a full tone? Is it a rich tone? Now, yes, I know some of their pianos at home don't always have full rich tones, but at least they start listening. And I also insist that each note has to sound full and each note has to be fingers stand and all that. Do they always stand? No. Sometimes that takes years. These little joints can be very weak. Look, even my 5th finger doesn't really stand up properly. It's bent. It goes flat on top. But we start. We put the pieces together and we start. And the other thing I insist on when they do the 5-finger exercise is that it has to be a steady beat. So I write all these things in their notebook. Steady beat, full sound, clean legato, and roll off when you're done, because I do a lot of this. So I start with that 5-finger exercise in the Suzuki book. And then from there, because the Bastians group those patterns, and they use those hand positions and group the patterns. If you've used Bastian book, you know this. They group, actually, I think you can go to the next slide. Yeah, this is how they group them. C, G, and F together, because when you do the skipping up and down, which is the chord, it's all white keys. D, A, and E, same reason. D flat, A flat, E flat, same reason. Then I call the last bunch down there the odd keys, and we do those as a group. So I start with C, we walk up and down, sometimes that's all they can do, then we skip up and down, then we add the chord, and that is something that they do on a regular basis. I ask them to do the walking up and down 5 times. They always want to do it 3. They're never, I can always tell how they practice at home because they'll come to the lesson and they'll walk up and down 3 times and then they're done. And I'll say, how many times did you walk up and down? Oh no. 5 times. So we start all over again. And then I keep the beat, and they have to do it with a beat. So they're supposed to go home and do it with a beat, 5 times up and down, nice and steady, full sound on every finger, every day. For those very younger students, there's 2 things that, well, one thing that I've mentioned already and that's important is that notebook. I mean, I don't know how you keep track of your students' information. You might have a different way of doing it. Some people use computer. I still use a good old-fashioned wire-bound notebook, and I write everything down. I like to be able to see quickly what I wrote down last week. I also like to see the progression in the notebook. You can, flip back sometimes and see how long have you been working on this piece anyway? And it's also good reference for the parent, because the Suzuki method requires that the parent be involved. So in my studio, if you come in with a beginner student, particularly a child younger than 8, which is a lot of our beginners, the parent has to be involved in the lesson. They have to sit in the room, they have to pay attention, and they have to know what their child is doing when they practice. To me, this just guarantees forward motion. I did not use the Suzuki method for years, and I can't tell you how many lessons where the kids came in, practiced incorrectly. We spent the whole lesson fixing what they did wrong, and then they would go home, do it wrong all over again. But when the parents are there and they sit in on the lesson, that doesn't happen. So when they're doing these 5-finger exercises and they're at home, the parent can keep track of, are they keeping a steady beat? Are they playing with a full sound? Are they, doing all the things I have on the list? And it does help a lot. They still don't do them 5 times, though. I can't figure that one out. The other thing that will happen with these pentascales as they go along, and now we're jumping ahead. I do them hands separately first, then eventually I put them hands together, and then I introduce touches. The first thing I introduce is playing 1-hand staccato and 1-hand legato. Now, I just told you, I told them 5-finger exercise with a clean legato, and instead of doing both hands staccato, I start right off with 1-hand staccato and 1-hand legato. That is because when they start playing hands together in the Suzuki book, the first thing they play is Mary Had a Little Lamb, well, that's what I put hands together first. And that has chords, right? So they have to pick up the chord and keep the right hand legato at the same time. So usually, if I can get the 5-finger hands together before they do that, I will have them play the right hand legato and the left hand staccato, so they learn to pick that left hand up. After they're competent at that, and at this point it's just the 3 keys that have the same pattern. So it isn't combining B flat, B and F sharp and all that. That's a little too confusing. So I just stick with the 3 ones that have the consistent patterns, starting with the touches. Then I do reverse and right hand staccato, left hand legato, and they work on that. If you want to think about Suzuki and step at a time, we just start with 1 note. We just start doing that. That's it. And then I'll say, okay, next finger. Because sometimes they can't do both things. So break it down. Always break it down. Make it accessible. Let's see. What's the next slide? Oh, that's way ahead. Okay. You know what? Are you using the one that was from Gmail?
Yes, the one that you sent me as a PowerPoint download, the Microsoft PowerPoint file.
Oh, shoot. This is what happened with the other one, too. I made changes to this and they didn't come through. Bummer. All right. It's not your fault. Go ahead. Another one.
Elaine?
One more.
Elaine?
Yes.
Are you going to use the music desk on the piano?
No. Is it in the way?
Yeah, could you put it down, please? Thank you.
Keep going. All right, it's not showing up. Go back. There should be a slide with a piece of music. The piece of music is Aunt Rhody, which is from the Suzuki Book 1.
I think that Jennifer Campbell sent it out because I quickly looked at all the attachments.
Yes.
There was a piece of music.
The music was in there. I don't know why it's not showing up. There it is. Okay, so if you printed it up, it's the Aunt Rhody. it's in there. It's in there. I don't know why this got all tangled up like this. But anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up is as they go along into the Suzuki literature, they are playing pieces mostly in the key of C that have the 1, the 4, and the 5 chord in them. And as I get through book 1 and I get into book 2, I maintain certain pieces, Aunt Rhody is one of them, in the literature. There it is. Now you can see, not that you don't know what a 4 chord looks like, but it's the only one in the key of C that has a 4 chord in it in book 1. So that's why I keep them reviewing that one. But when they get into book 2, I take a list of pieces that have basically this chord, that chord, the 5 chord, and the 5/7, and they transpose them into every key. So as we go along through learning the new scales, which we'll get to in a sec, they will be transposing book 1 pieces with the cadence chords in there, so that by the time we've gotten to learn all the scales and get started on the fingering, they've transposed all those pieces, and then when I say, okay, this is a cadence, and I just use the basic that's in basic most books, then I just switch it over to cadence, and I have this major scale and the major cadence that goes with it. So that's how I introduce cadences. I do it through the literature rather than just saying, okay, this is a bunch of chords and this is how you have to play them. Yeah, sure. No, well, sometimes it matches up, and the transposing goes right along with whatever key they're practicing for a scale, and sometimes it doesn't. So I start with C, and then I have them play it in G, and then I have them play it in D, and I just go around the circle of fifths. And if they get hung up on a key, let's say they get to E, and they can't deal with the 2 sharps and the B chord, we'll sit there for a couple weeks, and then their scale might move on. So I don't necessarily keep them lined up. Okay, let's see. Introducing the major scales. I start with the major scales, and I start by explaining what a major scale is, or just generally what a scale is. And I'll play all the keys and say, chromatic. I like to do the whole tone scale because they never know that one, and it's exotic and it really gets their attention. So I'll play chromatic and I'll play whole tone. I'll say those are just examples of scales, and then I'll play the major scale. If we go from C to C and play all the white keys, it creates a major scale. The reason I don't get into intervals and going crazy talking about half steps and whole steps is because these kids that I work with are all Suzuki students, and they're so used to hearing, they hear it. And they've been doing the pentascales all this time, they hear it. I really don't need to go crazy talking about that. So I focus on key signatures. And one of the reasons I do that is because that's the way I was taught. This is Anthony Macaulay talking here.
Why are they used to hearing?
Because they do, the Suzuki stuff is all by ear.
Oh, so they listen to the CD?
So they listen to the recording and they reproduce it. And so they're very, very much, I have a hard time with transfer students because I'll play for them and I'll say, did you hear, and they don't even listen to themselves. So, little point here, teach your students to listen.
They can hear half and whole steps, is that what you're saying?
They hear the pattern, they just hear the pattern. So they know if they're off right away, and they don't, so I don't fuss with it. But I spend a lot of time on key signatures, and I spend a lot of time saying how many sharps, how many flats. So the way this is written up here, that's how I write it in their notebook. I start with 1 sharp, I start with C, 0 sharps and flats. I tell them 5 goes on the name of the scale, and we fill in 4 fingers, no thumbs, and that's how we start. You can call it a tetrachord if you want. If you're into teaching whole, half, go for it, because a lot of people teach that way. Pinky's on name of scale, and again, this is really important. Tone, play with a full tone, play with a steady beat. If they sit down and start doing that thing, stop them. Keep it steady, beat to a note, full sound, stand on fingers, blah, 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 all that stuff. As many things as you can get them to accomplish it at the same time. When they're done, roll off.
Do you assign a metronome speed for that?
Not at the beginning. I try to stay away from the metronome with really young kids. It just makes them nervous. It's better to just kind of wait till they're a little older. And, you know, if they absolutely need it, or if they have a parent that's good with really carefully working with them and can get them to use the metronome, and I've had kids like that. But mostly, no. I'm the human metronome. That's what I call myself. That I just tap the beat while they play, and that way, if they're a little off, you can adjust to them, and they still feel good about accomplishing something. You don't have to tell them they were a little off. They'll figure it out eventually. So the key signatures. I think, this is me, my opinion again, I think it's very important that they learn the number of sharps or flats that goes to a key. Every single time they play their scale at the lesson, I start with and how many sharps or how many flats until they understand the word key signature, and then I will say, and what is the key signature for? And even when they get to be teenagers, I keep doing this because I stopped doing it with my teenagers for a while, and then I found out they were getting really weak on their key signatures. So I started doing it again. Every time. I think this is really important because if you look at the literature, most of what's written for students is in C, it's in G, it's in D, maybe it's in F. And then they start to move along a little bit, get a little bit more advanced, and the next thing you know, they've got a piece in A flat, or even an F minor. And if they look at 4 flats and they don't know what to do with them or how to think about them, they're sunk. Then they spend a whole week doing it in the wrong key or missing the flats or whatever. Drill those key signatures.
Can you give us an example how you do that, Elaine?
The key.
How you drill that? Like, for example, I say to my students, okay, so it has 4 flats. What key would that be? Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Name the major one, name the minor one.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes I'll make them even say what the 4 flats are.
Yes.
You know. What are those 4 flats? Because they'll look quickly, they'll count them, they'll say there's 4, and not even equate it with their A flat or F minor scale. They'll just say 4 flats.
Right, they have to know.
Yeah, they gotta keep going over those steps. You know that. If you've been, one of the reasons I prepared this talk was for younger members, not the old guard who's been doing this for a million years like I have. Now, when I introduce the fingering, and that's the next slide, so if any of you have it, when Felicia gets back, she can flip it along. I do it in scale groupings. C, G, D, A, and E all have the same fingering. Now, Felicia, when you can bring up the next slide. Okay. So right hand ascending, left hand ascending. That's not how I write it in their notebook. I write an ascending and a descending fingering for the right, let's see, how do I put this? I put right hand ascending, left hand descending, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I put left hand ascending, right hand descending, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. That's what I put in their notebook. I'll usually start with C, G, and D, and just do those 3. Now, for some students, this is the beginning of passing the thumb under the hand. That doesn't have to be a problem. Now that they've been playing for a while and they're pretty solid with the standing on the fingers and all of that, passing the thumb under the hand is accomplished. It can be accomplished. I haven't had trouble with that in a long, long time. So if you're still having trouble with that, maybe take fewer steps to get to passing the thumb under the hand. And bringing at this point, just the 3rd finger over the thumb. A phrase that I use a lot is stay on the corner of your thumb, just that part right there. Okay, it doesn't always work. They don't always stay there. They like to play on that knuckle and pull their wrist down. I try real hard to keep them on the corner. But you're still saying good tone, steady beat, clean legato, blah, blah, blah. You just keep saying it over and over again.
It's nice to hear you say that, because even the favor has a diagram of them.
Right.
Standing on the side of the thumb.
Yeah, a lot of the books, you know, they still do the hold the ball thing, which is, you know, we've all been told for years now that's not a good idea, and the books, you know, still have those pictures in them. That's why I don't use too many method books. You know, I use that Very Young Pianist, which leads, if you do all 3 books, it leads into Bastion Level 1, and I use Piano Lessons, Bastion, that's the one I like. I use Level 1 and Level 2, and that's it. And I never look at another method book. I like teaching from the literature. I just prefer doing it that way. What about it?
I think you said you write in a book that the left hand descends.
Yeah, I put right hand ascending, I put an up arrow, and left hand descending, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I put left hand and an up arrow, right hand and a down arrow, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1.
So then when they come to their lesson, you get them descending with their left hand first?
No,
They do it?
they go up first. Yeah, yeah, they got to figure it out. You know, I've never had anybody do that. I don't know if you've experienced this, but I always find they always have trouble going down. They go up fine, they can't go down. If I could figure out a solution for that one, of course, I guess you could do contrary motion for a while. That would help. But yeah, Karen.
Could you just step over a few inches? I can't see the very bottom of your.
Oh.
D, F sharp, D flat, thank you, and then I will have to ask you about the D, F.
Okay, so that's what I write for those 5 scales, so I start with just 3, and then I add on A and E, and then when we get to oh, by the way, I teach all the major scales with that tetrachord fingering, all of them, all of them, and I go up to 5 flats and 6 sharps, and they have to tell me the key signatures, and they have to do it with the tetrachord fingering. I don't wait to do more complicated scales as they get older. I just think that's a silly idea. I haven't had anybody who can't handle this. They all do. The 3 scales, B, F sharp, and D flat, I call that fingering black key rule. And we talk a lot about 2 fingers on 2 black keys, 3 fingers on 3 black keys, over and over. And I make them push the keys down, 2 fingers, 3 fingers, and your thumb plays the white keys. And then we do B and F sharp and D flat. And they're fine with that. In the meantime, while we're working on this stuff, they're still transposing those pieces from book 1. So they're learning that at the same time. And that gets them doing chords and gives them another reason to be thinking about those key signatures. The flats are the most complicated, and I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of the books just sort of leave them for the later. Because when I teach the flat scales, and you'll notice that they're backwards. I go around the circle of fifths till I get to those flat scales, and then I start with F. And I do F, and then B flat, and E flat, and A flat. And I teach 2 different rules, one for the right hand and one for the left hand. So I'll take a week to just do the right hand rule. And what we discuss at the lesson is 4th finger always plays B flat, thumb plays F and C. Next week they come in. What's the rule for the right hand in the flats? I don't know. Well, what note does your 4th finger play? B flat. Okay, that's a start. Then we just do the right hand. If it takes a couple weeks, it takes a couple weeks. Left hand, F of course is the same as C. And B flat, E flat, and A flat, I write in their notebook, and this time I only write it ascending because they should be able to figure this out by now. 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3. I put that in their notebook. They forget it immediately, and I'll ask them. Now, I used to be able to ask them if they could remember a phone number. Most kids can remember their own phone number. So I'll say, what's your phone number? And they'll tell me their phone number. I say, good. 321 432. If you can remember your phone number, you can remember your scale fingering. So then we work on the left hand. And I'll keep them going over the right hand while they're learning the left-hand fingering. And this is just one octave, and hand separately. They're still transposing those pieces in book one. So let's say now they've gotten to the point where they're playing all the major scales with these fingerings, and I still do groupings. C, G, D, 1 week, but we'll boost it up to 2 octaves and still hand separately. And let's say also at this point they have finished transposing all those pieces in book one. When they've reached that point, then I tell them about the cadences, and we start playing the cadence. And then I incorporate the cadence with the scale they're playing. So if they're playing a C scale, we do the C cadence. If they're playing a G scale, they do the G cadence. And they're fine with that. They've been playing them, they know it, they're fine. Because again, my kids listen, so they know when they're wrong, so they correct themselves, which is nice to see. I also encourage all the same stuff with the cadences, staying on the corner of the thumb, using the wrist to lift off the chords, etc. So I try to incorporate as much technique as possible, because I don't use technical exercises. I teach technique from the scales. I do use technical exercises in certain cases, but it's always student by student, whatever they need.
Elaine?
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. No questions from you.
This process of having them transpose pieces to learn the chord cadences while they're learning the scales, this is all prior to them encountering this stuff in written music. Like you'd have them learn the cadences in those different keys before you'd have them read cadences and chords in those keys.
Yes. It's all done by ear. Yeah. Yes, good question.
And what's so good about that is it's a direct application of theory to the music.
So when you get to the literature and you see it, they've already done it.
Yeah.
They've already played
Yes.
it. They've already heard
Yes.
it.
Yes. Yeah, so what the question was, for people online who can't hear, that I teach all of this by ear. I write my little notes in the notebook, but I don't, and I will get to this. There's a book that I use for reference for all of this. And when they get a little bit more advanced, then I insist everybody get the book. I started doing that a few years ago because I got tired of writing the same things over and over again.
What book is that?
It'll come up. It'll come up. There it is. The FJH Classic Scale Book. That's my favorite. That's my favorite. Most of the fingerings in there fit with what I use. Most of them. I made some slight fingering adjustments in graduate school that I had learned. That what is in that book, when it says classic, it's exactly what Meckley and Petrillo taught me. And then when I went with Dr. Valletta, he showed me a couple little shortcuts. So I teach the kids the little shortcuts. No biggie. But that's mostly what's in there. So now we gradually add the octaves on. So till I get to 4 octaves hand separately. And then I start asking them to put them hands together. We start with 1 octave hands together. And now I break it down more. I just do 1 scale a week. I think some kids could handle 2 scales a week, but I don't want scales and all of that to take up the entire lesson, so I just do 1. 1 key a week. And now we're going to do the major scale, the cadence that goes with it, and I will introduce the arpeggios. And this is how I introduce the arpeggios. I start with the 1 chord in block, and I call it hand over hand. So we do 1, 2, 3, 4, and a note, and then back down. Again, depending on the age of the student and how savvy they are, I'll just stick with that all the way around, whole circle of fifths. That, by the way, I always go around the circle. Once they get the flat scale fingerings, I just go from D flat to A flat to E flat to B flat to F and just keep going around. And every time we get back to C, I introduce a new concept or a new cadence or a new arpeggio, something gets added on. So if they need a whole circle worth of block chord hand over hand, fine. And then I'll do it broken, same thing. All the same stuff, clean legato, blah, 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 steady beat. The reason I do it this way is so that they learn what an arpeggio sounds like and exactly the way that you're going to play it when you play it all with one hand. And then I start introducing the fingering to the arpeggios. By the way, I start arpeggios on D flat, because if I'm going around the circle, D flat, A flat, E flat, B flat, all the same fingering, and the white key is where the thumb goes, and so you got your long fingers on your black keys and your short fingers on your white keys, and then it makes it much easier for them to play, because that reach with arpeggios is a big reach, and sometimes it's hard for them at the beginning. So if you're on white keys and you're going 1, 2, 3 and trying to get your thumb up to that C, you know they always wind up on their nail, no matter what you do. So I start with D flat. And that's where I start the arpeggio fingerings. I don't have as good a system for arpeggio fingerings as I do for the scale fingerings, because they're not as regular. And they don't match up with the scale. So you can say C through E, all the fingering is the same, but not for the arpeggios. And the same thing with the black key rule scales. They don't all have the same fingering. So not quite as regular. And I have to say that they don't always memorize those arpeggio fingerings as much as I would like them to. They're always sitting at their lesson going, do I do it this way? I have an adult student. She's been with me for almost 20 years. And every time she plays an arpeggio, she goes, and this one, and she always says was, and this one was this. and it cracks me up, because first of all, I'm sitting here going, it's not that it was, it is. But I never say that to her. And how come after almost 20 years you still don't know these fingerings? God, please, learn them. And she has the book. Now the cadences and the use of inversions of cadences and the use of inversions in arpeggios. I would love for all of my students to do all of that. Right now I have a teenager, he's actually a junior in high school, and he does not play the inversions of his arpeggios. He has never been a gung-ho student, but he's steadfast and he moves forward and practices, and he's one of those ones that will practice his major scale every week and just sort of glance at his minor scale. But he loves classical music. So I figure if I've done nothing else, I've created a classical music lover. And, he's not going to be a musician, so I adjust it to suit his need, and that's what works for him. So, yeah, they should learn all those arpeggios. They should learn all those inversions. They should do all that stuff. And I certainly have had plenty of kids do that. Actually, I was going to mention that I had 2 students. Well, I've had more than 2, but two of the students who I know went on into music and went to college to play piano, and one of them went to Millersville and studied with Anita Renfro. And every time I ran into Anita, she told me that he was doing really well. And one of the last times he was there, when he was still there, she said, oh my God, he played an F-sharp melodic minor scale and knocked everybody's socks off at his jury exam. And I just cracked up, because I guess Millersville gets a lot of piano students who have never played any scales, let alone F-sharp melodic minor. And so her colleagues were just astounded that he could play this scale. And I said, well, yeah. The other one is a student, he went to Berkeley, School of Jazz, not university. And I asked him how he dealt with those modes. The jazz people do, everything is Mixolydian and Dorian. And he said, no sweat, I just start the major scale on the 5th note and start on this. So he was fine with those scales because, drill, 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 major, harmonic, minor, melodic, minor, we did it all. I don't introduce the minor scales until they are playing all the major scales 4 octaves hands together. And then I introduce the minor scales. When I introduce the minor scales, I do it by introducing the relative minor first. I keep saying over and over again, they share the same key signature, this is the relative, and we start with the fingering. I don't do the tetrachord thing on the minors because now they've been tucking and they know all that, and so I associate it with the major scale fingering as much as possible. So we'll go through the circle of fifths 2 or 3 times doing the relative minor, and when I feel like they're beginning to get competent enough at it, and again, depending on the student, some students insist on doing their minors hand separately, some will put them together, just everybody's different.
When you start out with this relative minor, which version of the scale do you use?
Oh, I always teach the harmonic. Good question. Yes, I always teach the harmonic.
What are the benefits of doing tetrachords that way?
For the major scales or the minor scales? Well, when I do it with the major scales, it's so that they could get the keyboard geography and know where the black keys are and learn those key signatures. Before, I mean, again, I'm an old Suzuki teacher, so step at a time, you know, start with something they can handle, and then you can add on the fingering and tucking the thumb and all of that. So, but I don't, like I said, I don't do it with the minors. It's by that time they're playing. And for example, the student who went to Berkeley, and I told his dad when he was very young that he was stuck with a musician, because it was obvious. But he put his minor scales, hands together 4 octaves, the first week he did them. And that was it. We never talked about anything else, he just did them. A couple of years ago, I had one of my students play for a master class, but I can't remember what she played, so you probably wouldn't remember her. But she was another one who did that. Oh, it's 4 octaves? Yeah, fine. You just do it. But not then, you know, some of them, they, like I said, this other teenager that I have now, he kind of sort of, maybe he does his minor scale once. And I've only taught him the harmonic minor. I'm not even going to bother teaching him the melodic minor. I don't bother teaching the natural minor, mainly because none of my teachers ever did it. So I had a student, an adult student who was from Russia. She had studied in Russia as a child, and she did the natural minor, harmonic and melodic. And if I happened to walk away from the piano, I don't know, put water in my water bottle or something when she started playing her minor scales, I would forget that she always started with the natural minor, and I'd be ready to tell her she was doing it wrong, and then I would remember, oh, no, she does it with, she does natural minor. So, I don't, have any of you had a teacher insist that you do the natural minor scale? Really? Yeah? You do, yeah.
I do it too. I teach the kids natural.
Yeah.
They like it, because then it makes sense when you say, okay,
Raise the seventh. Yeah.
They have no problem with it.
Is it the same
I
keys?
have them play the major, and then there's a little link that they step down and do the relative natural minor, harmonic minor, melodic, and then they link down to the next one on the circle of fifths, natural.
Right.
Harmonic.
Yeah. Well, it's just the way I was taught, so that's what I do.
Yeah, Westchester, we had a group that was supposed to play harmonic, melodic, and major, all 4 octaves together.
Yeah, well, that's what I always did for my jury exams. I always did the major and then the harmonic and then the melodic. And of course, I was...
I'll teach it, this is the natural, this is where the key signatures derive from, but I'll just tell them it's not in my practice routine, you can just use it as a stepping stone to get to natural, to get to harmonic and then melodic, and then keep those 2 in your routine.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the end result is what you're after, and we can get there about 10 different ways. Analogy, when my husband is a chiropractor, he's retired now, but when he was in school, you know, I don't know if you know much about chiropractic, but a chiropractor adjusts the spine, right? They take those vertebrae and they kind of move them a little bit so that they're in perfect alignment. And it cracked me up when he was in school because there are so many different techniques for doing an adjustment. You know, there's the one I can think of off the top of my head is Gonstead, diversified, you know, and I would laugh. I'd say to myself, you guys are going through the same thing that we go through with, you know, how do you teach a scale? And, you know, it's the same stuff. If your way works, great. Believe me, I'm not standing up here saying you have to do it this way because it's the only right way. This is what I do. It works for me, and it gets the job done. Let's see. Is there anything past the JH scale book? Or is that? Oh yes, chromatic. The last thing I introduce is the chromatic scale. This comes after they do everything else. And I use this fingering, and if you got the handout and you're curious about this fingering, I had done for many years, because I didn't finish my master's till I was 40, the, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, that kind of fingering on a chromatic scale. And my chromatic scales were always iffy at best. And this fingering I learned from Dr. Valletta. And so when he taught me this, I went home and I practiced it like I did everything else he told me. And lo and behold, I can really play a nice, clean, solid chromatic scale now. So I highly recommend this fingering. I do this, I only do this hand separately. I never put this one hands together because when they play hands together, they tend to listen to their right hand, and their left hand just sort of follows along, and I constantly have to remind them to listen to their left hand. Sometimes I have to tell them to play their left hand louder than their right hand so that they actually pay attention to it. But with chromatic, I never put it together because I really want them to listen to each finger and to play. And again, always rhythmic, has to be steady. One thing I skipped over, sorry. When they get to the 4 octaves, hands together, I introduce playing with an accent. And I use Peter Mack's Huckleberry. That was one of the greatest things I got from his talk, because I used to tell them to accent 1 out of 4, and then if they started counting numbers, forget the fingering, went right out the window. So when I discovered Huckleberry, it was like, yay, this is so good, because now they say Huckleberry, Huckleberry, and they put the accent in. And when they finally can play the scale fast enough that I can say, put the metronome on round 60, that's when I start using the metronome. All right? Now, one of the things I was hoping to do for today, which didn't happen because I was asked to do this at the last minute, I was going to take a couple of videos of some of my students doing this. One of them, he's in 4th grade, and he's playing, his scales, 4 octaves, hands together with a metronome. And I thought, just to show you, it can be done. He plays with the accent. And at the lesson, I always have them play the scale first before I do anything else. Without the accent and without, sometimes they'll play with the accent, but a lot of times they don't. Just to make sure they know where they're going and their fingering is right. And then I'll say, okay, now do it with the accent, and then I'll put the metronome on, and then we'll do it with the metronome. The chromatic scale, they absolutely have to go home and practice with the metronome all the time. I won't back down on that one because I want it to be even, and I want them to listen to each finger, and I want them to make sure each finger sounds like every other finger. And just, again, I teach a lot of technique with this stuff. So, and I think I've gotten to the end of everything here. Any questions?
When you did the pentascales, did you do minors as well?
Not usually, but I have some exercises that I use later, especially mostly with transfer students, but every once in a while I'll get a student that just really needs to stay in that 5-finger thing and not be messing around with walking around. And then I use the Schmidt preparatory exercises. And they've been around for a million years. That kind of thing. It starts with walking up and down, and it goes from there. I just use the first couple of pages of those, and then I will have them transpose them and play them in major and minor. And there's a couple of other exercises I do that with too.
Schmidt. Okay.
Yeah, the Schmidt preparatory exercises.
What's the benefit of this chromatic scale fingering as opposed to the one?
For me, it worked better. And I made up the chart. I made up that chart. Let's see, I put a photo of a keyboard, and then somehow, I don't even remember how I did it. I got the numbers on top of the keyboard.
Like this?
And yeah, I made that. Like I said, it just works better for me. And it's so easy to just, I have this as a PDF on my computer, and I just send it to the student family and say, print this up. And the first thing I make them do is memorize the fingering.
I know why it works better. As a person who uses this fingering all the time, I love this fingering. It's because it groups more of you get bigger groups of notes in one chunk. So you aren't turning as much. It's the turn that slows you down and trips you up.
Thank you.
I was going to say, I teach both of them I think this one is very fleet, and it's like Felicia said, it is, it's buttery, it goes fast. But if you want, if something's slower and you need power, 1-3-1-3 power works.
I was introduced to
different situations.
Yeah.
I was introduced to this fingering probably 10, 12 years ago by Dr. Carr. I never heard of it at that time. And it immediately took what was, I don't remember what it was, but it immediately did what we wanted for that piece. But I think both fingerings are important to teach because you do use them in different
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah, well, I have kids that every once in a while, they'll start out with this, and then the third finger shows up on the black keys. You know, I guess it's just a natural thing, because that's such a long finger, it just does it. So they're pretty flexible. But I played the Pathetique Sonata in my senior recital from college, and that chromatic scale, it just never came off the way I wanted it to, ever. And then when I learned this fingering, it's just right down. I was like,
I think it's important to know both.
So. Any other questions?
How much time do you spend on scales and bases at a lesson?
If it's a half-hour lesson, I try to make it 5 minutes. If it's a 45-minute lesson, it might go 10, maybe. I'm fast. Max will tell you. I'm fast. And of course, see, I expect them to practice. So if they come in and their scale is a mess and they're not prepared, I just go do the same scale for next week and I skip right over it. I'm not gonna. I hate spending too much lesson time on scales, and it can happen because they get lazy and they don't want to work on them, or they think they can practice it at their lesson or whatever, But yeah, try to keep it from hogging up the whole lesson. Another thing. I don't remember which conference it was, but I went to a conference where they talked about resetting the brain at a certain point in a lesson. And what I do is we go over the scales, the cadences, the arpeggios, the chromatic scale, and then I do theory. I go over their theory assignment. And then I usually say something like, and what do you want to do first? Or I'll say, and first I want to do, and I'll pick the piece that I want to hear that day, whatever they're working on. And it's that reset. That, okay, now we're really starting. And it helps them to stay focused because, lessons are pretty intense and you got a lot of ground to cover in a short period of time. You're only with them once a week for 45 minutes, maybe an hour if you're lucky. So that brain reset when you start the pieces, like I said, this is what works for me. I know there are teachers who don't start with scales and, reverse the order of things. Put the theory at the end. I don't like putting the theory at the end because I tend to forget it. I have to put it in the middle to make sure I do it. And I know I don't look it, but I'm pretty old. And I can't, I do things the way I do things. So, old dogs can learn new tricks, but it's much easier to just stay with what you're used to and what you know works. So, do we have any questions from the peanut gallery there and online?
Jonathan just asked about the scale fingering, but I posted it.
Okay, thank you.
Elaine, this
Yes.
is Sue. I'm just wondering, can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Am I too loud?
No, it's not your fault. The speakers are loud.
We can turn it down a little bit. Right there.
Yeah, hold on, sorry, it's doing there we go. Okay, go ahead.
And this would be a question for Elaine or for anyone else who's there at the meeting. Is there anything that you do with your students to make learning the scales more exciting? For example, providing a background track or something like that they could play to, with something, especially when you get to the stage where you have you're wanting to put some accents in or something that would make it fun.
Not me.
Jonathan.
I do for the pentascales. Faber has a pentascale book where he has these creative accompaniments that the students can also improvise. What I did during the pandemic is I actually made my own backing tracks, added some instruments and some sound effects, and I would have the students play over the accompaniment, and then I would have them improvise, and there'd always be an image like the seashore or a rainstorm or something like that. And I actually did this with the adults too. They all seem to have fun with it. So just
Yeah,
having them
that
play the
sounds
scale
awesome.
and then improvise with it. And the only rules for the improvisation is start on the tonic and end on the tonic.
Can you share that somehow with everybody?
Sure.
Would you?
I could make a blog about it.
That would be really great.
Sure, I could do that.
Thank you.
Elaine, I'd be interested in, could you give us an example or two of what other
I have another question for Elaine if she's able to answer.
Okay, hold on a sec, Jonathan. Somebody's asking a question here. Just let me
Sure,
finish
sure.
this one and then I'll get to yours. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would be interested in, could you give us one or two other examples of other technique? You said you use the scales for all kinds of technique.
Oh, other technique. As you clean legato.
Posture.
Well, just because at the beginning it's just about strengthening the fingers and getting them to not collapse. Yeah, my Meckley used to call this flinching. I've never met anybody else who calls that flinching. I just say keep your knuckles up. Flinching. He used to call this when the first joint falls down. Yeah, he's the only teacher I've had who ever said that. Yeah, and anything and everything to get that to happen. And use of the wrist too. When the cadences, of course, I like them to get to the end of the scale and roll off.
Could you show us how do you have them do all the inversions of the cadences?
Yes, eventually, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How would it look?
Oh, which key do you want?
C. How about that?
Okay, C. Okay. They don't all do it that way, but that's what I ask for. I try. Jonathan, what's your question?
Yeah, question. Do you ever use the technique of blocking scales, particularly the ones that have a lot of black notes in them?
Yes. Yes. I'll do in B, thumb on the white, then two. So that there's three fingers on the three black keys. And, I'll make them go 4 octaves if they have to. Whatever they need to do to get the job done. So. Okay?
And when do you introduce, or how do you introduce contrary motion?
It depends on the student and what they need to do. When I was at Westchester working on my master's degree, I didn't need to do contrary motion. I did as an undergrad. And as an undergrad, when I had to do contrary motion, it was 2 octaves up parallel, 2 out contrary back, then 2 up, back down, to 2 down, 2 out, back, and then 2 down. That's what I did. So if I have a student that I feel like contrary motion will help them, then I do it that way. But Dr. Valletta said, there's barely any place in the literature where you have to play in contrary motion. We're not going to require that. So I stopped doing it. And it is a valuable way to practice. Every once in a while I kind of pull it out for myself and just go over it, because it is helpful. Just for practice, even if you don't use it in the literature.
I find it very helpful working with adults who are older, who are beginners. They may need that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, if you start, let's say, on C and you do the mirror image thing, yeah, that can be helpful. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that helps them.
Yeah. Felicia?
Well, I was just going to add that like the zigzag scales is what I call them. I do like a more hectic version of what you described with the contrary. just to keep things interesting. Because I am terribly bored by scales, but I'll do them. I'll do them in
Yeah.
the zigzag motion.
How to do this contrary motion?
Oh, I'll play it. So it's 2 up.
Elaine?
Yes.
They call that the formula pattern in the Royal Conservatory of Music.
There we go.
And I find that kids really like that. They think that is really cool.
Keeps it interesting.
I had a pretty advanced student that I asked him to do that, but he was my kid on the spectrum who was very stubborn, and he just wouldn't do it. And I thought it would be good for him because he was very good and very talented, and he could zoom up and down the keyboard. So I figured I needed a way to slow him down a little bit, but then he just refused to do it. So, but the only other student I had really seriously working on contrary motion was one of the ones who wanted to do the associated board test. So she did them.
Yeah.
It's in the Guild too.
Is it?
As an option,
Yeah.
I think, right?
Yeah, you could. I mean, there's, well, I like I said, this is just what I do. It's not engraved in stone. I have changed what I do over the years. You know, there was a time when I didn't teach any cadences at all. So, do what you do. It's all good. I had a thought. Oh, yes. For my students who stay with me all the way through high school, and then they go off to college, and I know they're not going to play the piano at all for the next however many years because they're busy, I will remind them, if you think you want to get back to playing again, start by doing your scales. Just do them all, and do them with a metronome, and build speed, and get them moving, and if you can get yourself to play them all for a couple of weeks, it'll bring your technique back. Because every time I've had a long break between playing, and it's happened to me a couple times in my life. The first time was right after I graduated from college. Clement Petrillo was a great teacher, but he made me a nervous wreck. So I didn't play for a couple of years after I graduated from college at all. And then when I got back to it, I was rusty. So I just started playing my scales, and boom, everything came back. Then it happened again later when my children were small and I didn't get to play very much. Sat down and played my scales. Boom, technique came back. So if they can start with that, then they can pretty much go back to playing whatever level they were playing when they stopped in high school.
All right.
We good?
Yes.
Yay.
Thank you, Elaine. So Jennifer,
Does this belong to anybody that got left at my house on the rainy day for the lunches? Is it yours? Thank you.
You mentioned love. I think love is something we forgot about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Love for people to sign.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Elaine. One thing I forgot to mention on the agenda is we still have the blog up and running, but we haven't had any entries recently. So if you want to reach out to me or to Jonathan, if you want to share about your summer experiences or what are you looking forward to this year or how awesome today's meeting was, you can share those kinds of things. So
There's recordings and handouts, resources.
yes, yeah, and on the website we have all the meeting handouts there, and that's in the members only page, and everything. The recording from today will be up there too. So if you I think that's about it.
The brochures they could take for stores and other.
Yeah, the brochures, please take a bunch of them. So, there's more where that came from. So take those and share about MLMTA. And I think that's it. Yeah, so we have food in there, and we got tables and chairs all set up. So please stay and enjoy. And thank you for a great first meeting. All right.